Hi everybody, I'm back again, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Great White Brotherhood. Now, before I start, a few days ago I made a video about the reptilians, and at the end of that video I asked people that would be interested if they would mention what they'd like me to talk about, because I had a list of downloads from the Great White Brotherhood on various topics, and I thank everybody that wrote in, and there was a very large number of you, but I thank you all sincerely for writing in and stating what you'd like to talk about. But I had a lot of people ask me about the Great White Brotherhood. Now, I've been working for the Great White Brotherhood for over 40 years, but it never crossed my mind to ask them their history. So I thought this would be an opportunity to do so and to put it all out to you. So I asked them, and that's what this video is about. Okay, so I'm going to start. The Great White Brotherhood. Oh, and as usual, I'm going to read bits of it, and if I think it needs any explanation, I'll stop and try and explain what I understand they've said. Now, the Great White Brotherhood is a vast collect of people who all once had an earthly incarnation, like what we're having now, have now passed into the spiritual realms, and who work actively and never ceasingly to assist humanity incarnate to come to terms with and to deal with the difficulties and travails of their individual and collective incarnations. So what that means is that the Great White Brotherhood are people like you and I that have now passed into the spiritual realms, and from there they work to try and help us who are down here going through this incarnation. Okay? The Great White Brotherhood was formed some thousands of years ago by the progenitors, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The progenitors, a group of people who first realized that it would be possible to assist people incarnate. Now, I asked them about this word progenitors because that means the first people. And I said to him, well, surely you can't be the first people, because heaven, I imagined, had existed forever. And they said, not really, they said. The first lots of humans that were put down here were little more than sort of animals, the sort of cavemen people, and had no knowledge of any spirituality or anything. And at the end of their lives down here, their incarnations, they would go to the heavenly spheres, but their life essence would just be sort of recycled, rather like animals' life essence is recycled. But once the humans reached the point where they understood spirituality, then heaven, as we know it today, was started. And the progenitors are those people that it started with, that first group of people aware of spirituality. Okay? Some of that first group are still active, and some have passed to realms so far above the rest of us that they no longer have the means of communicating with us. Now, we wish to make it plain to you, who will receive this message, that the group known as the Great White Brotherhood is totally dedicated to helping you who are incarnate, and they have effectively formed themselves into a group soul over time, and so have formed a group personality that thinks as one. So although there's this long chain of beings, some that have been in the heavenly spheres for thousands of years, and some that are more recent arrivals, they all think and act as if they're one person. So the information they send to me is the same information that the very wisest ones are aware of. Okay? Okay, now, the Great White Brotherhood was formed by a relatively few but spiritually awake group who decided that just living in the peace and joy of heaven was a selfish act, and that they had to take positive action to assist man incarnate who was enslaved both physically and spiritually by archon influenced people, and were obviously deeply unhappy and confused as to the reason why incarnation was being inflicted on them, having no knowledge that they had in fact volunteered to incarnate. Gradually, over time, more spiritually awake souls returned to heaven at the end of their incarnations and joined the Great White Brotherhood. This group of enlightened souls did not have a name at that time and still really doesn't need one. It is sufficient for them to know that they are working individually and collectively to help humanity incarnate. Names give no status in heaven, it is action that counts. But the point was soon reached where suitable candidates incarnate, down here, sought to receive the wisdom of this group in order to spread that wisdom throughout Earth. That's people like me. I'm not the only one that the Great White Brotherhood talk to. I'm sure there are people all over the world that they talk to. Anyway, so after some thought, the name, the Great White Brotherhood, was chosen. At the time, it seemed the best name and described who this group were. Great implied a large collection of people. White implied purity of soul and ambition. Excuse me. Brotherhood implied a group joining together with one aim. However, over time, the meanings of words change. Today, unfortunately, great implies noble. White implies skin color. Brotherhood implies a group exclusively male. This is, of course, not at all representative of who the Great White Brotherhood are. The Great White Brotherhood are humble souls. There is no skin color in heaven. The Great White Brotherhood is open to both sexes, people incarnate and discarnate. Incarnate, in case you don't know, means people down here on earth. Discarnate means people that have gone back to heaven. So you can be a man or a woman and still join this group. But it is too late to change the name and start again, and it must be said, whatever name would be chosen, it would over time become criticized by those who do not wish to understand the aims and objectives of this group. So we continue with that name. Excuse me. Next came the problem of selecting earthly instruments willing and able to work with and for the Great White Brotherhood. An instrument just means a person, somebody who's willing to work with these spiritual beings. It is easier in some respects today as people are more spiritually aware, but originally it was difficult indeed to find suitable candidates. There are a number of criteria that must be considered before a person incarnate can be trusted to impart to the world information entrusted to him. The first element, obviously, must be awareness that the Great White Brotherhood exists. This implies that the person selected has himself been contacted by telepathy, which was my case, or has been informed of the Great White Brotherhood's existence by other people. The next element is a burning desire to devote the rest of his incarnation and his progression through the heavenly spheres to the aims of the Brotherhood. Next, the person must have a reasonable command of his native tongue. We need to be able to impart information in the mind of the chosen person by telepathy, so that it can be shared with the public who speak the same language as that person. So, not only must the chosen person have a good and deep command of his native language, but also the ability to read and write that language. Memory is not sufficient. Then the person must be willing to develop telepathy so that the Great White Brotherhood can communicate with him and he with them. Next, it is advisable that the chosen person not be indoctrinated by an imposed religion. He must have an open mind. So you can see that to find suitable candidates throughout the world was difficult and still is. In some countries, even today, religions are imposed. Long years ago, it was even more so, and we had no desire to put people at risk of a painful death just to help us spread our message. Even today, it is not easy to find people who have a real command of their native language, and it is getting more difficult each day as artificial intelligence is taking over the role of education, and people rely on machines to speak and to write for them. They're talking about computer stuff where you speak into a microphone and it writes it all out for you, that sort of thing. So we search the world assiduously in an attempt to find suitable candidates willing to work with us. But here and there, we do find candidates, and we work hard with them to train them to our required standards, not only in command of their language, but in the degree of their ability to develop telepathy and, in some cases, clairvoyance, because we use a number of gifts of the Spirit in our desire to help humanity. Now, in my case, excuse me for speaking about me, but even though I had a fairly good education, they sent me back to school. I was like 40 odd years old, but they sent me back to night school to improve my English, and I spent a long time learning telepathy with the Brotherhood. So it's important, all that. But we will never give up, and so gradually our message is transmitted to the world. We are grateful for a recent invention, the internet, that has assisted us greatly. If I may, quick drink of water, excuse me. Oh, that went down well. It's very hot in the south of France here today, and with all the lights on, it doesn't help. We should also mention the detractors of the Great White Brotherhood. There has been and still are malignant forces that have done their best to suggest that our intentions are evil. We leave the people of the world to be judges of our intentions. We are often asked questions concerning the great masters of the past and if they are members of the Great White Brotherhood. When by the masters, they're talking about Jesus, Buddha, and all the other people from around the world that lived long ago. We must say that all the great masters are committed to helping their fellow man, incarnate and discarnate, find and... sorry, I said that wrong. I'll read it again. We must say that all the great masters are committed to helping their fellow man, incarnate and discarnate, find and follow the path to God. Thus, although it is not our intention to name names, we are prepared to say that the aims and objectives of the masters and the aims of the Great White Brotherhood are one and the same. Now, how you interpret that is up to you. Is Jesus a member of the Great White Brotherhood or is he not? I will just say that they told me once, the views of Jesus are known to us. And they stopped at that. So anyway, now, we're almost done. These aims, the aims of the Great White Brotherhood, these aims are the path to God, which is found in the degree that love can fill the hearts of man. However, love is not sufficient. Knowledge of the path to God is necessary, and the wisdom to interpret that knowledge is paramount. Thus, the Great White Brotherhood is dedicating to sharing its knowledge of all aspects of life with all the people incarnate, and we will never cease to implement those aims. And that's the end of that. That's what they told me. Now, as usual, if you've got any questions, please ask. And before I go, out of the blue, the Brotherhood suddenly told me the other day about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and I wrote down what they said. So if anybody's interested in finding out about Bigfoot, we'll add it to the list, because I'm going to try and make probably a couple of videos a week if I can, and get through the list that people asked me to do. And I thank you once again for asking me, giving me the things that you found important, and I'll certainly try and get through the whole list eventually, okay? But for now, I say thank you for listening to me, and goodbye, and I'll speak to you soon, I hope. Bye.